Well, if you're a regular viewer of the Aussie Wire News, you'd be aware that the UN are trying to push through, or the World Health Organization specifically, are trying to push through a number of amendments to their global health regulations. There's a new treaty involved. It's all a bit confusing. I'll certainly put my hand up and say I'm not really understanding exactly what's being done. But there's someone I've brought on today to help me wrap my head around it, someone who's trying to actually make a bit of a difference, and that is Katrina Lane. Katrina, thank you so much for joining us here on the Aussie Wire.
Hey, Topher, good to be here. Thanks so much.
Now, Katrina, for those that may not be across this, we obviously get new viewers all the time. They may not be aware of what's actually going on. What's happening with these World Health Organizations, the treaty, all of that?
I think it's meant to be confusing. Not many people are across it. And the wonderful people at Australia Exit the WHO are probably the people that have been campaigning the longest about this. So there's three important things happening at the moment. At the same time, they're happening and they're pulling a Swiftie, basically. I think that's a really nice way of saying they're trying to pull a Swiftie over us. So there's the Pandemic Preparedness Treaty, which is a treaty to do with pandemics alone. That's one thing. There are the 2022 International Health Regulation Amendments, which were adopted by our government in May this year. And there are the 2023 International Health Regulations, which will be tabled in January, and we'll have a period next year and into 2025 to reject them, adopt them, et cetera, That's all up for discussion still. So there's three separate things happening, and they're all massive.
So when you say things happening, what are some of these amendments? What are the changes that they're making, and what's their rationale for it?
So the international health regulations haven't actually been changed since 2005.
Okay.
So we lived through the last 4 years under the 2005 version of those regulations. And we know how meddling the WHO was during that period.
Absolutely.
One of the big things that they want to do is they want to stop being an advisory body and become a legally binding body so they can meddle even more. And that's part of the draft of the 2023 International Health Regulation Amendments. So they've staggered things very, very cleverly. Last year's amendments reduced timeframes for approval and adoption. So they sort of thought, okay, we'll get in there first. We'll reduce these timeframes that member nations have to consider and adopt our amendments. And then we'll hit them with the 307 amendments of 2023.
307?
With a very short. So this year they recommended 307 changes.
Right.
One of the big ones, as I said, is they want to change from being an advisory body to a legally binding body. So essentially we're acquiescing our sovereignty.
Yeah.
They think we're unable to govern ourselves. And we don't think we are,
Well, I mean, this is one of the characteristics of someone who wants to be in something like the World Health Organization or work for the UN is that they think they're smarter than everybody else and that everyone should just do as they're told. I saw a fantastic presentation from Australia Exits the WHO at the Australians for Science and Freedom inaugural conference in Sydney 2 weekends ago. And one of the things that caught my eye there, and I'd love you to elaborate on, is that these amendments involve removing caveats around preserving human rights and respect for the individual and these sorts of things. Tell us a bit about those amendments and why do you think that they feel the need to make those amendments?
I can't imagine why any international organisation or any organisation would want to remove those words. So they are in the drafts of the 307 amendments that have been tabled, that have been working on this year. So there's a working group in Geneva, a WHO working group, that have been given these three amendments and they've been told to unpack them, have a look at them, draft them up so they can be presented to the Director General in January next year. That same working group is actually having issues with things like that. Right. So they've expressed concern around the removal of things like human rights.
Okay.
And they've indicated that their deadline of January won't be met because they can't come to an agreement and they can't complete the draft in time. The draft must be ready by January because there is a required lead time from when the working group presents their draft until May next year, when the member nations, including Australia, vote on these amendments. So there's trouble in paradise too. It's not just us having difficulty getting our heads around it. Their own working groups having difficulty. But yes, they have intended to, or I've seen the draft, and it is to remove those words. Even the word pandemic, it's not, it doesn't give power to the WHO in case of a pandemic. It's also in case of a presumed pandemic.
Yeah.
So it's not even required to declare a pandemic and then become overbearing. They can just assume or be concerned there might be some trouble somewhere.
Yeah, potential pandemic. Now, you spoke of trouble in paradise. We've just seen recently there's a couple of European countries that have now come out quite strongly and said that they're not going to be backing these. Bring us up to date on that. And what does that mean? What does it mean for a member country to say no, thank you? Can they really say no?
Not really, no. Well, they can say no. So only a 2/3 majority is required to vote this in. So even if Slovenia and Slovakia and New Zealand all on the weekend came out and said that they've decided they're not going to go with these amendments. If they're in the minority and they wish to stay a member nation, they'll have to comply.
I see.
So people like Senator Malcolm Roberts, who's a national hero in my view, he's for, and people like Senator Babette, they're of the idea we should be removed from the WHO.
Yep.
And that's why, because we don't actually have a choice unless we're in the majority.
So this could create a very interesting situation where potentially they get the 2/3, the amendments are rammed through, and then a number of the countries that represent the less than 1/3 that were opposed may actually then view that as a trigger for them to actually exit the WHO entirely?
Yeah, maybe, yeah. I mean, there's certainly benefits of working internationally and working with groups internationally, but to be told how we have to manage our own country, particularly in times of crisis, a response to any crisis should be nuanced, according to location and the people and the resources at hand and all the different things. You can't just have a broad brush approach to anything like that. Yeah. So everyone has to have their independence.
Sorry, I cut you off.
That's okay. Independence is a really, really important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I've got no issue with international collaboration, but it has to be voluntary and it cannot supersede your own government doing what's in the best interest of your own people. So before we go into what you're actually doing and how you're assisting with the pushback here, tell me a little bit about yourself. Have you been running campaigns for a long time? Is this something that you've been passionate about for decades? Are you relatively new? Was it COVID that kind of got you into this? Tell me a bit about your story.
I grew up in a very awake family, and I was terribly embarrassed with them for most of my life because I just wanted mum and dad to go and play tennis like everyone else instead of having house meetings about one world governments and world banks.
Sure.
So I'm very grateful to them. But I've been a campaigner for sustainable food systems in a localism sense for a very long time. Done lots of work around food security and the importance of supporting local economies and that kind of thing. So, and this is the same thing. It's about decentralization. And people work best and function best and flourish best when they're left to in a smaller community rather than trying to have an overbearing governance from far away.
Well,
so that's really my background, yeah.
Decentralisation is a topic very close to my heart. So you've won me over with that one. Now you are involved in a campaign right now. This is remind me, it's standupnowaustralia.com.au, I believe is the URL. Tell us what this is about and what you're hoping to achieve with this.
Yeah, so Stand Up's a community advocacy group that started in 2020. And we just have themes of the month and provide information for people so they can, because as you know, information has been somewhat lopsided over the last few years.
Absolutely.
So we just provide information about all different types of topics. And through the months of October and November, we decided to talk about government overreach. So we've had lots to talk about. And the last part of this theme, we've concentrated on this campaign. So we've talked to lots of politicians. I've talked to many senators over the last month. I won't name names, but I can tell you there are some of them who have signed off on things on behalf of the people of Australia, and they have no recollection of doing it.
Yeah, wow.
It's really freaking serious, the lack of awareness that's going on in our government about this. And very patronizingly, I'm told very often that as if the WHO would do anything to harm us or put us in a situation of crisis, we're all on the same side.
Yeah, well, I mean, the last 3 years haven't been a cautionary tale at all, have they? They haven't been
not at all,
a warning.
No.
Now, you've actually got something specific going on here, and I wish I'd come across you a few weeks ago, and I'm grateful to Rebecca Barnett, one of our Aussie Wire affiliated journalists, for actually bringing me to your attention, but it is very last minute. You've got this thing called the People's Letter here. It's on your website, standupnowaustralia.com.au. What's this letter about? What's it supposed to achieve? And I believe the deadline for it is literally tomorrow.
It's Friday. Oh, yes, sorry, tomorrow, because this
Yeah.
is going air on Thursday.
Yeah.
So this is the People's Letter. So Voices for Freedom in New Zealand had huge success with this. As you know, the new coalition government in New Zealand has decided to vote no against the WHO. And so with inspiration and their permission, we have plagiarized. We have taken their content,
You were
but with
inspired
permission.
by.
We were very much inspired by their good work. And so we've written a People's Letter. So a very, very clever human rights lawyer has helped us write a letter that will be delivered to the Director General of the WHO on Friday in Geneva.
Wow.
And this letter is a letter on behalf of the people saying due process has not happened, consultation has not happened, our government has not represented its people. We do not feel represented by our government, and therefore we're writing a letter on our own behalf. We've had over 10,000. We've had over 10,000 signatures in the first 24 hours. It's been amazing.
Wow.
And numbers are. It's been fantastic. The collaboration and the reach that we've got. So,
well, let's
you can jump on the website.
Let's try and pump those numbers up. And so where do we find this? So obviously it's standupnowaustralia.com.au / the People's Letter, is it?
Yeah, or if you just go onto the homepage, it's right there in front of you. You know, you can't miss it. We've made it very bright yellow. If that's right, that's the homepage. So you can click on the People's Letter there, that blue and black button. You can read the People's Letter first if you'd like to. You can read about it. There's more information there. There's lots more content if you want to get your head around what the heck's going on with the WHO. And then sign it. It's just a jot form. All it asks for is your name, your email address and postcode. We don't want anyone else's details. And that's it. And we ask you to share it. It's a really simple thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, Katrina Lane, I wish we had a lot more people like you. I applaud what you're doing. Thank you so much for, there's a lot of people that throw their hands up in the air when it comes to these sorts of things. And they say, oh, well, it's the UN. What can you do? There's no, what chance do we have? All these sorts of despairing, I refer to them as black pill kind of responses. And then we see people like yourself who are saying, you know what, my hands are small, I know, but they're not yours. They are my own. If I can do a bit of plagiarism of my own, of some lyrics there. And I applaud it. I wish we would see a lot more of it. I'm so grateful that you have stood up. Katrina Lane, thank you so much for joining us here on the Aussie Wire.
Oh, thanks for having us so much, Topher. Thank you.